Angela, and this is my kitchen. Today I'm going to prepare 3 meat dishes. The first will be saltimbocca alla romana, which is veal. This is really rump veal, not the scallops. You notice it is larger, and we'll see that later on. Is a veal dish. Then we're going to prepare cotolette di maiale alla mamma, which is my mom's special recipe for pork chops which are baked in a pizza sauce. Then we're going to prepare involtini di manzo, which is a beef dish. They're something like a fine sliver of beef, which is rolled around a filling and then cooked in a heavy skillet. Today, the first recipe will be our saltimbocca alla romana. We will need, to serve six cutlets, such as these. Now, if you notice, I have pounded these to about 1/8 inch thickness. You can ask your meat man to do it for you if you don't have a cleaver. If you do have a cleaver, you can take 2 pieces of wax paper and put your cutlet or what have you between the 2 pieces and pound it until it is 1/8 inch thick. Lacking that, get a board on which you put 1 piece of wax paper, the meat, and then another, and put a board on top of the meat. Then with a hammer, just hammer along, and it'll serve the same purpose. However, if you buy a whole veal rump and partially freeze it, it's very easy to get a lovely piece of veal like this. So you will buy not veal scallopini necessarily because they are small, though they're fine too. But if you want a larger piece to serve 6, then use your rump veal, which your butcher can pound for you. We're going to need a 12-inch heavy aluminum skillet. Then we are going to need 6 of the cutlets, 6 slices of prosciutto. Again, this is nearly transparent, as you can see. If you cannot find prosciutto, some of these supermarkets might not cover it. What you could do instead is use Smithfield ham. Now, if you look in your produce section, they do have extremely thinly sliced Smithfield, which serves the purpose just as well. However, this is a little saltier than prosciutto. If you don't like it that salty, let it marinate in just plain water for 15 minutes, and then some of the salt will be released. However, if you use it this way, I recommend not adding salt to your meat. We will also need 6 slices of whole milk mozzarella, a tablespoon of sage leaves, not the ground sage, but the sage leaves. Be sure when you go through it that you notice that there are not little stems, because sometimes they do have these little tough stems. Look at here, I found one, such as this, and just discard it. We will need 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Here I have already melted it. Salt and pepper to taste, again remembering that your prosciutto is salty. This is 1/4 of a cup of, it's a 1/2 cup of white wine, dry white wine. Now, this is good white wine. I do not ever use white wine that they say for cooking. Now, if you're not going to drink it in a glass, why would you want it in your cooking? It's salty and it's not the finest of wine. Use a good wine in your cooking. We will need some rounded toothpicks. The flat ones will not do because they break too easily. These are much stronger. 1 tablespoon of fresh parsley for garnish. Finally, we have 6 slices of lemon, which we will use for garnish as well as the parsley. I've cut these slices in half so that we can make a pretty design with it. I'd like to show you now how to prepare your saltimbocca. We have the veal here, we have the prosciutto here, and we have the mozzarella. The first thing we will do is add a little pepper. and just a pinch of your sage. Then we add our prosciutto, and then we add our mozzarella, which I try to avoid having too close to the edge so that it doesn't ooze out. Then you turn over the end corner on one side, the end corner on another, flip it over, and get your toothpicks, which we have here, and use 2 or 3 to completely enclose the inside so that they will not ooze out. If some does, you're not going to be losing very much of it. So I'm going to use 3. All right, so here we have 6 saltimbocche ready to be cooked. Would you join me at the stove, please? Had I not pre-melted the butter, I would have put my stove on to between medium and medium-high to melt it. However, since I have melted my butter, I'm going to add it to the skillet and put my heat on high. Now what we're going to do is sizzle these saltimbocche for no more than 2 minutes on either side. And if we want to, if we feel that it needs a little more because it's thicker, of course you can add a minute or so. But veal cooks very rapidly, and if you cook it too long, it will get tough. So that we will cook it as fast as possible. And as you notice, the pan is wide enough to accommodate all 6. Now as soon as the butter heats properly, and that will be when you hear a sound of it in the pan, and if we listen carefully, you can hear it, and you see little bubbles. Can you hear that? All right, that means that the butter is hot enough, and I'm going to add, again, my heat is on high, I'm going to add my saltimbocche into the pan. There we are. Going to time this now for 2 minutes, moving them so that they do not stick. All right, there's the buzzer. I'm just going to turn the timer off and turn the saltimbocche. Timing it again for 2 minutes, and I'm going to lower the heat. Keep it sizzling though. But as you know, the electric stoves kind of build up heat. And time it again for 2 minutes. I turn off the timer, 2 minutes are up. This is a warmed platter. I'm going to remove the saltimbocche to the warmed platter. And one thing I want to tell you about veal, if you add a liquid, for example wine, to the veal, while you see some of the mozzarella is coming out, but that's fine. If you add a liquid such as wine to the veal and continue cooking the veal in the wine, it's going to toughen. So remove that to a warm platter. Put my heat up high. We're now going to add our ½ cup of white wine until it comes to a glaze, and then we're going to pour it over our saltimbocche. All right, and with this I would use a wooden spoon to move the juices around. I'm going to use this spoon. Get up all of that nice brown. And some of it, of course, will evaporate. And this should take, no more than ½ a minute. Let me arrange the saltimbocche nicely around the platter, because presentation is half the taste of a meal. And when this has reduced enough so that it's a little thicker with a glaze, we will pour the hot liquor over the saltimbocche, and it should be served immediately after the garnish, of course. Can you smell that? All right, that's just about ready now. See what happens at this point? It sizzles more loudly, and it has reduced itself to the point where I can turn off the heat, give it a final twirl, and pour it into my platter, like so, getting all of that good juice all over the saltimbocche. All right, now if you would meet me at the counter, I will garnish it for you. Ecco, saltimbocca alla romana. Doesn't that look lovely? Notice the little swirls of lemon and the parsley that I have garnished it with. Very good. Now I'm going to make cotolette di maiale alla mamma. This is my mom's recipe for baked pork chops. And you're not going to find this in any cookbook because I've researched and I've looked. So what I did was call her to have her reinforce to me exactly what the ingredients were. And of course, I had it pretty well in mind. So here we are. We have 6 pork chops. These are loin pork chops, and I have removed as much of the fat as possible, as you see. We need 6 pork chops. We'll need a half cup of olive oil. It'll be used in a baking dish. This is going to be baked in the oven for 1/2 hour, and you'll be surprised how wonderful this tastes. Another way of calling this dish is cotolette di maiale alla pizzaiola. Pizzaiola meaning we're using oregano into our tomatoes, and it's something like a pizza sauce. This is the equivalent of a small can of tomatoes, which I have diced, as you see here. And if you notice, these are the Italian plum tomatoes, which are the elongated ones. I've saved the juice, which you'll see later on. Here we have 2 cloves of garlic, which I have sliced into very fine slivers. We will need another garlic, this time chopped, which I will use on the top of the recipe. Here we have 2 peppers sliced. Now this is not a bell pepper. This is the much finer skinned and more easily cooked, especially in a baking dish, is a Cubanelle pepper. It's the elongated one. Even though this is red and this is green, they are the same pepper. This is more ripe than the green, and it's not hot. It is a mild pepper. We will need the equivalent of 2 tablespoons of oregano, and here I have sliced 2 medium-sized potatoes, and you see how much I get out of that, and I've sliced it quite thinly, as you can see, and this will cover the pork chops before baking. This is the liquid from the can of tomato that I will use to drizzle over the top of the potatoes, and of course, as always, salt and pepper to taste. Now, let me take my baking pan, and I am going to put just a teeny tiny bit of oil at the bottom just to coat. I'll use a paper towel to spread this around. And of course, we have trimmed as much of the fat as possible off of the pork chops because we don't want our pork chops sitting in a layer of fat. I'm now going to arrange them in the pan. The 6 chops are in the baking pan. I will now salt them lightly and just a turn of the pepper mill for each one. Next, I'm going to add some of the tomato to each of the chops, like so. And of course, finish it all up. There. Next, I'm going to take the slivered garlic and place, and it's very, very fine, and once it's cooked, it will not have the flavor that you think it might have. It'll be wonderful. Now, these are two fairly good-sized cloves of garlic that I have sliced very, very finely. Then we're going to add our pretty, you notice the slivers are really quite fine. And always remembering that when you use pepper, remove the inner web. There's a little white web there that tends to get a little bitter. And again, cover your chop with the green pepper, like so. Finishing up all of your pepper, of course. There. All right. A little more salt for the tomato. A little bit of oregano, and just a teeny bit. People have a tendency to over-oregonize. All right. Then we're going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil over each one. Like that. Next come your potatoes. Now what you do with the potatoes is just place them here and there on the chop so that the chop is completely covered. And if you have any extra potatoes, you can put them in the center because they're delicious. Like so. There. Okay, I'm placing the others in the center for those that would like more potato. There. And again, salt for the potato. A twist on the pepper mill for each of the chops. And for those in the center, here's another one. Okay. A smidgen, and I mean a smidgen of oregano. You see one pinch and it goes for all 6. And this is where we use the rest of our juice. I'm going to disperse it over each of the chops. Now what we do, once these are ready, the oven is preheating at 350 degrees. In order for the potatoes and the chops to get real hot and start cooking, I cover this with aluminum foil for the first 15 minutes. For the last 15 minutes, it is cooked uncovered, and I put it closer to the broiler section so that the potatoes will crisp up for us. And there we go. And then drizzle the rest of the olive oil over all of this. And some for the potatoes in the center. All right, there we go. Finally, we have that 1 clove of garlic, which I had chopped, and again, drizzle that over the entire baking pan. And it's enough to cover each of the chops, because we just want a suggestion of the garlic taste on top. Here's our aluminum foil covering our baking pan. And now I'm going to place this in the oven, time it for 15 minutes, and when the 15 minutes are up, I'm going to uncover the pan and give it the last cooking of 15 minutes time. And here are your cotolette di maiale alla mamma. What I did after the half hour was up, remember I said after 15 minutes I uncovered the pork chops and raised them to the second rung below the broiler, and they continued to bake for another 15 minutes. The last, I added 5 minutes to that, and I raised the heat to broil and let the top crisp nicely like this. So the total cooking time would be 35 minutes with the 5 minutes added on for the crisping portion of it. I'm now going to make involtini di manzo, which are beef birds. Again, you're going to need very, very finely cut slices of beef. Here I used round tip beef roast. However, they do sell in the supermarkets minute steaks, which might do as well. If they are not thick enough, again, use your double layer of wax paper plus your cleaver or what have you to pound it to 1/8 of an inch. As you see, that's very, very finely cut. Now, if you feel that if you don't have a cleaver, let's say, and it's maybe 1/4 of an inch, what you might want to do is tenderize it a little bit with a marinade. This is 1/4 of a cup of red wine and 1/4 of a cup of olive oil. Marinate your beef in this for about an hour, and you will have tenderized it. At the same time, you can use this at the end for a nice garnish and for making a nice little juice to go over the whole thing. The pan that we will use here is this. This is a large, heavy iron skillet. It's a 12-inch skillet. And I think that this will do very, very nicely. Now, I am going to use this for my marinade, for my juice making at the end, because I did not marinate this. However, if you did marinate your beef, you would not want to add oil to your marinade. So I'm going to put this at the end because I will be using that later on. I have pre-mixed the filling, but I'm going to walk through the ingredients so that you'll know exactly what I did. First, I ground about 4 slices of French bread, but you can also use the larger Italian bread, 3 slices of those in your blender, and you'll get some beautiful, beautiful crumbs. Do not use the dry breadcrumbs. It just will not work. So this is the equivalent of 1 cup of freshly ground breadcrumbs. I added 4 tablespoons of olive oil. Totally for the recipe, however, we will need 1/2 cup of oil. This is 1 clove of garlic chopped, which is already in here. 1 tablespoon of parsley, which I have put in here. The other tablespoon, the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons reserved for garnish. 1/2 cup of grated Romano cheese. Make sure that it is the imported variety because really it is better. The cheese is in here too. 1/2 teaspoon of paprika, which is also in here. If you notice, those breadcrumbs are an orange color because of the paprika. Salt and pepper to taste, which I have already added. And we will need, again, our round toothpicks for rolling these. Now, if you do not want to use the oil in your marinade, you would need 1/2 cup of red wine to use for your pan juices at the end. So you have an option, either to use this with oil or a 1/2 cup of red wine. All right, let's take these ingredients away because I don't need them right now, and just save those things that I will need. We're going to roll our involtini. And what I do is add about 1.5 teaspoons to each of my involtini. Now the 4 tablespoons of olive oil have made these moist. You may or may not be able to see that, but the crumbs are not dry. There we go. Here are the toothpicks. Again, roll in each of the sides. And we take one toothpick and just kind of weave it through like so. Roll in both sides and roll. And sew your toothpick through. So you notice if you had used the flat toothpicks, they probably would have broken. So make sure that you do have the round. Tuck in both ends and roll. All right, our involtini have all been rolled, and now I'm going to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. And then we're going to go to the stove and add whatever is left of the 1/2 cup of oil, remembering that I used 4 tablespoons of the olive oil for the filling. Why don't you join me at the stove now? All right, there's the rest of the oil from the 1/2 cup. Now this is starting to sizzle. I'm going to add all of the involtini. These also should take no more than 4 minutes. There are 4 sides to turn. And keep turning them so that they don't stick and so that they cook evenly. Now we'll do that for 3 or 4 minutes depending upon how long it takes for all sides to brown. Again, if you have a heat spot in your stove, as most of us do, make sure that each of the little involtini gets that hot spot so that it can sear nicely. The involtini are nicely golden at this point. Unlike the veal, we add the wine to the whole thing and let it glaze through and evaporate. It won't evaporate completely, but of course it will become glazed, and at that point you know that your juices are ready. And that again will take 30 seconds, 45 seconds, no more than that, especially in an iron skillet, which is extremely hot. And I'm doing this so that sometimes your stove is a little off kilter and the pan does not sit straight, so that the juices will sit in one side. We'll make sure you get the spot that is not receiving some of the liquor. Now, there you go. The glaze is nice there. I'm going to turn this off. Remember, this has been on high all the time. The heat is turned off. I'm now going to add our involtini to its serving platter, which has been warmed. That look pretty? I'm going to take a wooden spoon with a that I can gather up all of those, that nice crustiness down below. See what a nice glaze, thick glaze that is? There, get all of that. I'm now going to transfer that to my serving platter. Go. Would you join me at the counter now? And here we have our involtini di manzo, and I'm going to add a little bit of parsley for garnish. Ecco. Here we have our saltimbocca alla romana, which is your veal. Then we made cotolette di maiale alla mamma, which is your pork entree. And here we have involtini di manzo, which is your beef entree. Allora, alla prossima volta, arrivederci. Ciao! Remember